And we are back on the Get Foxy show, this time with the amazing and lovely Stacey Donelson. Stacey, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Get Foxy show with us today.
Thank you for the invitation, Terry. This is fun.
Well, you bet. Well, for the listeners, Stacey and I have a little bit in common in the fact that we both grew up in Wyoming. Now, where did you grow up specifically?
I grew up in a little teeny tiny town called Shoshone, which you only know if you're from Wyoming. And it's kind of a litmus test to see like if you really are from Wyoming or if you're just from Casper or Cheyenne. Because sometimes if you've just moved there, you don't know where Shoshone is. But yeah. Shoshone.
Yeah. The place I grew up in, Buffalo, I mean, is kind of a thriving metropolis compared to Shoshone. I mean, you're small town Wyoming girl.
Yeah.
How did you go from small town Wyoming girl to big time acupuncturist?
Like a lot of us, it was a circuitous path. I actually went to the University of Wyoming, graduated from the University of Wyoming, and right after graduation moved to New York City. My then boyfriend, now husband at the time, it was 1998, the height of the dot-com boom, had just gotten a job back there as a graphic designer. And I went back and started teaching in a private school, and he ended up convincing me to go to programming school. So I became a programmer and started working for .com. And during that whole entire time back east, I was really, really sick. My whole life, I've always had sinus issues. And moving from the super high mountain desert of Wyoming to mold and humidity central of New York City, I was constantly sick. And I had a doctor at the time who basically told me, you know, you either need to go to an ear, nose, and throat guy, which we know what they're going to do. They're going to do surgery. Or I can send you to this friend of mine who's a naturopath, and we can see what she can do. And that started my exploration and kind of inoculation into natural medicine. And she did what naturopaths do and put me on a gazillion supplements and radically changed my diet. And within 2 years, not only was I not getting sinus infections, but I no longer had seasonal allergies either. And at the time, the questions I asked her, I got really fascinated by holistic healing, was really into all that, and was thinking about becoming a naturopath. And she told me, you know what, you should become an acupuncturist. The way you think and the questions you ask, you're a natural for becoming an acupuncturist. And I was like 24 at the time, and basically looked at her and said, thank you, but no thank you. Everybody knows that acupuncture is just in your mind and it doesn't work. And I am deathly afraid of needles. So no. And then fast forward 4 years, 5 years, I'm back in Wyoming training horses. And one of the horses I was training got acupuncture. And that totally blew my mind. Watching that animal get acupuncture and watching how he responded to it totally made me question the whole placebo thing. And now it's funny because 15 years later, we're now beginning to realize that placebo isn't inert, that placebo is actually an active component to a lot of medicines. So, but that's what got me curious. And then a couple of weeks later, I was in a horse accident and broke my knee and ended up using acupuncture to rehab myself. And so, you know, it was totally through trial and error, and I kind of had to have the universe smack me around a little bit before I realized, you know, my husband, when I started doing acupuncture, when we were rehabbing my knee, and I was so completely fascinated by how well it works, he looked at me and he was like, couldn't you have just taken your naturopath's advice 5 years ago and just gone straight to acupuncture school? Like, did you have to do this whole circuitous route? And I think I did, because now when I have people who come in who are very skeptical and are kind of here as the last resort, I have a lot in common with them, because that was my route to medicine.
You've really become a pioneer in the whole Chinese herbal medicine realm, in that you've started blending whole hemp extract and CBD with Chinese herbs. And this is something that's kind of new, in at least in the United States. How did this come about for you?
Again, just being in the right place at the right time. Being in Colorado, Colorado has been at the forefront of legalizing cannabis. And I've always been really into herbs. I've used herbs extensively in my practice. And it's funny because it actually comes back to our Wyoming roots. My dad, who has been a lifelong rancher and farmer and is in his 70s, has all the aches and pains associated with that lifestyle, is actually pretty good at taking his herbs. And I had made him some topicals and they would help with the pain. But he asked me about 4 years ago if I could make something that lasted longer. But all the stuff I gave him lasted about 2 to 4 hours, but that was it. And when he was out in the middle on the tractor in, hot summer, he didn't exactly want to stop and apply an oil to his low back in order to keep on, cutting hay. And at the same time, I had been having people self-medicate with CBD and cannabis in my clinic, and had started noticing patterns and trends of when I prescribed them herbs. And that main trend was that if they were combining both, my typical dosage of herbs to them would act as if I was overdosing, which made me start experimenting with lowering the dosing of my herbs when I prescribed if they were taking cannabis. And it didn't matter really if it was high CBD, high THC. It just was if they were taking cannabis. And so I experimented, and I took one of my standard pain topicals and I added a really low dose of CBD to it. I'd also done a lot of research and realized that there's a lot of concern among the medical community about the quantities of CBD that we are using, and that there's no real research behind it. There's a minimal dosing research, but nobody knows what happens when you take those giant amounts long term. So again, just kind of using the theory of our herbal background, I applied the lowest minimum dose I knew that worked with my topical, and then I gave it to my dad. And I didn't tell him what was in it. I told him, this is I'm experimenting with. And he called me up about a week later, and he was like, I don't know what you did, but that stuff, it smells the same, but it works way better. And he's like, I'm getting about 20 hours worth of relief out of that topical, whereas before I was getting maybe 2 to 4. And so that's when I then just started giving it to my patients, and I would tell them what it was. I told him what it was. It was funny. For a long time, he was worried I was going to get arrested. And I had to explain to him the legality of hemp and marijuana and cannabis in Colorado. But I've always made stuff that had no THC in it. I've always gone the hemp route. I have self-educated myself, and that's what everybody in this industry does, because there's so little research that has been happening, and it's so new that if you're in this industry, it's trial and error, and it's theories based upon what you think things are going to work, and then it's a lot of research coming out of Israel, and it's all relatively new. And I felt relatively confident mixing low amounts of hemp with proven Chinese formulas, because I knew what those formulas did without the hemp. So when I added the hemp, I could see how it changed, and I knew what my differentiating variable was. And so that's how I got started doing all of this. And what seems to happen is there seems to be this major synergistic effect between the herbs and the hemp. And as I've been doing research, it's interesting because cannabis has always been part of the materia medica around the world, and both THC and hemp versions. And so It's just been erased from our materia medica in the last 100 years. And so it's kind of interesting going back and doing a little anthropological research to see like India, Tibet, and places where it hasn't necessarily been super illegal, to see how it's still being used and how they use it as medicine.
And you just recently took a trip to China and Tibet, didn't you?
Yeah, I just got back. We got back about a month ago now. And it was really cool. I mean, over there, especially in Tibet and in the more like outlying regions where the culture is still relatively unchanged, using hemp is not a big deal. It's just part of the medicine. And when you talk to the people from there, they kind of think you're a little cuckoo, that it's so new that you're like making this connection, because to them it's like, well, yeah, well, duh. Like, you know, I had one medicine man say to me that, you know, when the herbs aren't working, or when you're so deficient that the herbs are going to be too much, you add a little bit of cannabis to the formula. And it's because it has the herbs work faster and better on a smaller amount. And so the exact effect that I'm noticing is exactly how they use the herbs in the medicine.
That's fascinating to me. As I was going through this, boy, this must have been 10, maybe 12 years ago. I went through some training, external chi healing training with a teacher by the name of Ken. And he's now up in Estes Park, but he's a Taoist priest and had some connections in China. And we got to talking about how the growing cannabis industry in Colorado was kind of changing herbal medicine. And he was talking to some Chinese herbal doctors who were also saying that cannabis really has a strong potentiating effect on some of these herb formulas, and they were using it in different pain formulas. And so lo and behold, here you are, and it's like, oh my goodness, she is just right on the forefront. So out of curiosity, how many I shouldn't say how many, the kinds of things that you're treating,
Mm-hmm.
what exactly are you treating using cannabis and Chinese herbs?
So I do everything topical. All of my stuff is topicals, and there's a reason behind that. One, there's a lot of receptors in our skin that work with the CB1 and CB2 that help get the hemp into the bloodstream and the cannabis into the bloodstream, and you bypass the digestive system, which if anybody who is in a cannabis legal state has ever tried an edible, you quickly realize that that is not something that is consistent at every application. And it's one of the thornier things that they're having to deal with, because your digestion is every time, even if the candy or the gummy bear or the brownie is consistent in how the hemp or the cannabis is distributed through the product, your body takes and uses it differently every time you take it and internalize it. So in my research, that was made abundantly, like overtly clear to me, and that it's way more consistent if it's topical or sublingual. And topical, I can, there's just, to be quite blunt, there's way less restrictions around topicals. And there's way, and especially now, like the testing and the, just rightfully so, that has to go with internals is huge. It's crazy. And then when you add that in with Chinese herbs, the amount of testing that I would have had to have done to create an internal, I'm bootstrapping this. I'm taking whatever I make from my clinic and investing it into the botanicals. It's not like I have a secret, venture capitalist that's funding me and all of this. And the topicals are just consistent, and they're easy to use. And when you mix them with the different herbs, it's mostly different types of pain and anxiety and sleeplessness, and recovery. So it's mostly musculoskeletal stuff, but it also has these other effects of, if you use our relief product along the back of the neck and along the inside of your wrists, it can have an incredibly calming effect without having to go internal. So like the seizure stuff and the stuff that Charlotte's Web and all of those products became super famous for, I don't really touch that. I mean, my stuff can work to some extent, but since it's not internal, it doesn't work the way theirs does. But peripheral neuropathy, aches and pains, chronic arthritis, the weekend warrior who overdoes it and can't get out of bed on Monday morning, women with extreme menstrual cramps, and all of those are the kind of symptoms that my stuff helps a lot with. And I have a lot of people who will tell me they use it anecdotally for anxiety when they get really nervous or whatever. The added bonus is that most of my stuff smells really, really good. And it's because the amount of herbs in it. And hemp and cannabis stuff doesn't necessarily have that reputation. So a lot of my female patients will use like my relief as like a perfume and will wear it on their neck or on their chest because it helps keep them calm and it smells good. So they can kind of, use it in public without being outed that they're using CBD. I also have, because of the herbs, especially in the relief oil, it's really great for skin. And so I have a lot of people who use that as a skin serum. And I've been asked a couple of times if I can just remarket it in a different bottle so that they can use it as a skin serum. Because it helps, a lot of those herbs help increase collagen and help with healing of the skin. And the hemp, again, potentiates those actions. And so, yeah, lots of different uses.
That's amazing. That is
It's become a joke.
amazing.
It's become a joke that if something hurts or something's not right, just put hemp on it and then see what happens. Of course, it doesn't always work that way, but yeah, it's pretty fun.
We're going to switch gears a little bit here, Stacey. I'm going to ask you the question that I ask all of my guests, and that is, what does Foxy and being Foxy mean to you?
Well, that's a fun question, Terry. Foxy means to me confidence with a little bit of mischievousness. So it's the ability and it's being super confident in who you are and how you are, and having a levity around that as well. And so just being really authentic and really confident in who you are and not taking yourself so serious.
And I can see that in you, Stacey. But I'm curious, has there ever been a time in your life where you haven't felt that? And if so, what did you do to kind of bring that back out in yourself?
Oh, I think all of us cycle through highs and lows, right? When I lose that or forget it, it's more like you forget it. You don't ever lose it, you just forget it. I have people in my life that help me remember. And there's just a part of me that, for whatever reason, my nature I've always had a fairly introspective nature. So I may get down in the dumps and think life totally sucks and everything's going to hell. And then at some point I get tired of my own belly aching and I start asking questions of how can I change this? What have I done, or how am I acting, or what is my belief or my story that's contributing to this situation? And what about this can I change within me? And then once I start figuring that out, it changes. I mean, that's the whole, like, Zen koan, right? It's like meditate and look at yourself, and you're a reflection of your universe. And so when I get down and when I forget that, over time I've gotten faster at it. It used to take me years to figure out that I just had to change my perspective. Now, sometimes I can do it in a day. Sometimes it takes me a couple of weeks. But yeah, it's just realizing that it's your mindset and your perspective.
And are there specific practices that you use to help you kind of get in tune with your mindset?
Gratitude. Like I developed a long time ago in high school, actually, a practice of gratitude. I was raised in a very conservative Christian household, and about high school, I kind of decided that most of what was going on in that world was, excuse my language, but bullshit. And but what I really did like about it was the whole treat your neighbor as you would like to be treated, and that love is everything. And so I took kind of those two tenets, and then at some point somebody must have taught me about gratitude. And I started, instead of saying nightly prayers, I would say nightly gratitude. And I still do that to this day. Like, as I fall asleep, I think about all the things in my life that day I have to be grateful for. And I just list it, and I just say thank you. And I try to do that in the morning. Like, I can tell when I'm starting to slip and I'm starting to go into a darker place because I forget to do it in the morning. But I always do it at night before I fall asleep. And I have found that the more I focus on what I am grateful for, the more I have to be grateful for.
That's excellent. And I think that probably is one of the big reasons why you have had the success in your industry that you have, is because you're not allowing yourself to really just dwell in that ick. Gratitude practices are so powerful, aren't they?
Yeah. I use it a lot with my patients, like especially the ones that are coming in and are just spinning. I challenge them to do a week of writing out 5 things every night that they're grateful for. And it can be as much as I woke up this morning to like noticing a flower in the sidewalk. It doesn't have to be big. And I think that's, most of us think we have to have these stupendous things to be grateful for. And yes, but there's also all these amazing little beautiful things that happen all day, every day. And when you train yourself to see those and recognize those, it just, exponentiates the gratitude and the amazingness.
Amen to that. How can people find out more about you, your work, and your products?
So goodlifebotanicals.com is our whole plant hemp extract storefront. They can follow me on, we're starting to get our Instagram profile working. So Good Life Botanicals on Instagram, also Good Life Acupuncture. They can follow us on Facebook and for both of those as well. And our clinic website is goodlifelongmont.com. And we're posting stuff up there all the time, and that's a good place to find out more about what we're up to and what we're doing.
Excellent. Well, I will include all of those links and the social media links and all that good stuff right on the show notes page at thegetfoxyshow.com.
Thank you, Terry.
Stacey, what's the one piece of advice? We're bumping up on time here. So what's the one piece of advice that you would have for the Get Foxy Show listeners out there about how to stay foxy?
Practice gratitude.
Short, sweet, plain and simple. There you have it. Well, Stacey, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today. I know you are super busy and you are out there making some positive changes in the world. And I just want to thank you for that and honor you for it. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you for this forum, and thank you for the chance to chat with you.